Hey everyone, welcome back to the Leadership Project with your host Mick Spears. Our vision is to inspire all leaders to challenge the status quo. We bring you weekly topics and thought-provoking guests to get you to stop, reflect, and think about what it means to be a leader in a modern world. Our aim is to help you become the leader you wish you always had, as we learn together and lead together. Today's episode is brought to you by my new book, You're a Leader, Now What? The Proven Path to High Performance Leadership. The book contains many of the great lessons that we've been learning together during the Leadership Project podcast, together with many other lessons that I've collected over my 30-year career as a leader. The book is aimed at first-time leaders, but really there's lessons in there for everyone. It would be greatly appreciated if you could go and grab your copy on Amazon as either an ebook or a paperback, and if you could leave us an honest review on Amazon. Now, on with the show. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Leadership Project. I'm greatly honored today to be joined by someone who's had a major impact on my life and my journey as a leader. Melinda Muth is the CEO and founder of Streamwise. She is a facilitator and fellow of the Australian Institute of Company Directors and is on the board of the Scholarships Foundation. And she'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Now, I mentioned that she's had a huge impact on my life. She was one of the ones that first opened my eyes to leadership in a program that I went into when I was with Talus, an executive leadership program where Melinda was the principal facilitator of that program. And she opened my eyes to a world that I've never been able to unsee since. And, the rest is history, as they say. And all of my journey as a leader started with people like Melinda and someone else I've spoken about on the show before, Joy Pitts, who was my first executive coach. So it's absolute delight to bring you Melinda today. I'm so excited about this interview and I can't wait to share her wisdom with you, our dear audience. So Melinda, please do say hello to our audience. Give a little bit more about your background and what did lead you to be with us here today at the Leadership Project.
Hi, Mick. Hello to the audience. Mick's just given you the reason why I'm here today, because to hear him tell that story and think that I made a difference in a positive way to his life and his career is why I do what I do. I had an executive career doing a number of things and kept running up against the issues of, how do you motivate people? Why don't they do what you want them to do? Anyway, I had, a great realization myself that maybe I wasn't in the job area that really suited me. So I retooled myself. I did a PhD and went on the faculty at the Australian Graduate School of Management, and I taught all the courses that had to do with people skills. All the things that people didn't really want to do because they were more interested in finance or marketing or whatever. But I loved those things, and that ended up leading me into a career in executive education and now, working with boards. And the thing that's happened along the way is when working with leadership teams and boards, there's these repeated patterns that you see in people's behaviors. They're not really necessarily aware of them because humans are action-oriented. We like to do stuff. So we like to get on the tools, but sometimes we just don't realize that we won't do a very good job if the environment we're working in doesn't assist us. And if the environment isn't healthy, then we really can't, perform at our best. And so there's things that go on. They're behavioral things. I think it's what people call culture. Now there's a word. People have so many different meanings for it. But it's the idea that behavior is a function of people's personalities, but also the environment that they're in. And what I like to do is try to help groups make a better environment so that everybody's performing better and they're enjoying it more on the way. So that's a little potted history of how I got to this interview with you, Mick, because we were working on a leadership program, and I was hoping that the talented people like Mr. Mick Spears would come on the program and even, go to greater heights with their potential, because we would look at some things that could really be helpful to people who are leaders, because really leaders are creating the environment. They're not so much on the tools anymore.
Firstly, I think it's wonderful that you're living your purpose and you found that direction or went, okay, this is what I need to do. And so many people have benefited from you following that path. And then you're right. You're hitting the nail on the head about why is this so challenging? I mean, people go through these transitions in leadership into their first leadership role, or when they're transitioning from leader to more a senior leader, or then into executive roles, etc. And it's making those shifts that is the difficult part. You use the terms that people are comfortable on the tools. They might be a wonderful accountant that loves spreadsheets. They might be a software engineer who likes coding. They might be a digital marketer who likes looking at algorithms and playing with algorithms, etc. But leadership isn't about that. Leadership is about how you relate to other people, and human beings are complex. Can you tell us a little bit more about why you think that transition is so tricky for so many people, Melinda?
Well, you're right, Mick. I mean, human beings are complex, and we are capable of the most extraordinary things. We also have some behaviors that maybe aren't so good. And we tend to forget that even though we're human beings, we're still an animal, really. And we have the psychology of some of the animals that we share 99% of our DNA with, like chimpanzees and bonobos. And some of the behaviors that are ingrained in the neurons in our brain are some, based on some very ancient circuits. And you have to recognize that. And if you want to magnify the good behaviors and minimize some of the things that aren't so nice, that's your role as a leader. So I like to think about, workplaces as are they a buzzy beehive where people are cooperating because the good behaviors are being, magnified by the leader, or is it more like a jungle full of monkey business? Because people can get up to some things that, are not so nice. The way people often describe it to me is, oh, there's just too much politics at work. And I go, politics. Well, when you look at the behavior of chimpanzees in a troop, the leaders typically use their intellect because they're very smart, just like and humans are even smarter. They also tend to use alliances and a bit of intimidation. Now, the chimps that have emotional intelligence, if I could use that term, or some capacity for awareness and empathy of others in the troop, tend to be the better leaders. They tend to last longer because they keep everybody happy. Potentially, they are looking out for their safety, and they're using their alliances to make sure that all the resources are distributed fairly. Now, these are the kind of things that leaders need to think about, but we tend to forget it. And so I like to think about the patterns that come from those behaviors and which ones to magnify and which ones to watch out for. Because when we have a gap between, what we say we do because we want to promote positive behaviors, a gap between what we say and what we do, things don't go so well because people can see that. And the bigger the gap, the more the stress. And the more stress, well, then you get unhappy people, you start to get mistakes, you get, people don't want to speak up. There's a whole raft of things. So I decided, that I would write a book and try to identify these behaviors and how to and how to diagnose them, because I think there's these things that leaders need to pay attention to that aren't what they think of right at the start.
As a leader, you don't have control over someone's personality. What you do have control over is the environment you create. So to focus your energy on the thing that you can control is to create that healthy environment to then foster healthy behaviors. How does that resonate as a summary of that point?
That is an excellent summary. It's the reason I wanted to study leadership, because I went in it like most people do. I'm going, I want to know how to lead people so that I can get them to do what I want to do. I want them to change. And people don't change. I don't think they change their personalities or the structure of it. They can modify their behavior if the environment encourages them to do so. So I think what you said is the role of leadership, to create the environment that pulls people along, that makes them want to commit, that makes them willing and safe to admit a mistake. All those kinds of things. You know yourself, if you work for someone you trust and you have a relationship with them and you make a mistake, you don't want to let that person down. So you would be willing to fess up to it. If you don't trust the person, you don't trust what's going to happen, that human urge to want to cover things up will take over, and people won't say anything. I mean, that's something that I notice in many environments, the capacity to be able to admit that you made a mistake. You have to be very safe to be able to do that, because I don't know any perfect humans, and we all make mistakes. And it's very hard to say that you did, but you have to be able to say that, to be able to review, to get better performance. I mean, if you're a leader, you want to make this good environment, but at the end of the day, you also want people to perform. I mean, we're working in organizations that do want to achieve something. So I don't want to say that it's the tools aren't important in getting the job done, because it is. I mean, it's all in service of doing something together, something purposeful that we want to achieve together.
We're touching on something really interesting here. I want to unpack a little bit, Melinda, because this is about performance. It's not about having a lovey-dovey environment where everyone has coffee and tea together, had a great time, and then I went home. It is actually about producing outcomes, but it's producing outcomes through a healthy environment. Mm-hmm. And there's probably a little bit of a misunderstanding about psychological safety sometimes, where psychological safety, people think, oh, you've got to treat people nicely and calmly, etc. Whereas no, I mean, we had Stephen Shedleski on the show recently, and he speaks a lot about speak-up culture and psychological safety, and pointing out that part of that is having radical candor, or at least candor, maybe radical candor, and Amy's work there maybe go a bit too far sometimes, but having the ability to be able to stick up your hand and say, I don't get this, or I made a mistake, or I don't know. Having that safety to be able to stick your hand up and speak your mind without fear of judgment and without fear of retribution. So having a healthy environment is not having a lovey-dovey environment where everyone's just best friends and isn't it wonderful. It's having a healthy, productive environment based on performance. How does that sit with you?
Well said, because there's that other phrase that you hear people use all the time, the soft skills.
Oh, yeah.
And I have to be honest, I really don't like that phrase, because it makes it sound like it's, we all want to be, we're all going to go and hug a tree together, and the people and culture department is going to take us off for some, team building, thing. And it isn't that. I think the soft skills, they're actually the hardest skills of all to acquire, because they mean we have to look at ourselves. Because for the leader, you have to look at yourself first. You have to know what kind of person you are, and what kind of impact you make in order to marry up your intent with your impact. And people tend to want to look at other people and say what other people did wrong, but it really starts with yourself. That's hard, So I think this notion that these skills are soft and it's all about making everything warm and fuzzy. And look, I think workplaces need to be positive. We need to see the glass half full. But like getting performance creates some stress. If you want to achieve something, it's not going to be easy. Think about athletes. They stress their bodies to achieve performance. Now, if they go too far, they break. So I think that the job of leadership is to understand what kind of environment, what kind of combination of support with challenge will produce a healthy performance, and people will not necessarily be happy every minute of the day because they're going to be working hard. They're going to be huffing and puffing. But at the end of it, when they achieve something together, there's going to be a great feeling about how they did it and their willingness to work with their team members again. And I think that's a far cry from it's got to be all nicey around here.
I'll come back to the stress point in a moment. It's really important. On the soft skills, I couldn't agree with you more, right? So first of all, these so-called soft skills are actually harder than your core skills. They're harder than learning how to program. They're harder than learning how to drive a spreadsheet. It's hard work, and you need to work on it every day, by the way. And secondly, it's not about creating a pillow environment. It's not at all, right? It's about creating an environment. How about this? I'm going to share with you what I think is a healthy environment. For me, a healthy environment is where everyone is respected, where everyone's voice is heard, where their opinions are valued, where people have purpose and meaning. They know why they're doing what they're doing, not just what they do, but why they're doing what they're doing, where they've got the psychological safety to be able to stick up their hand and say, oops, I made a mistake, or hey, I don't understand. Can someone explain this to me? And it's about where everyone feels that they matter. And once people feel that they matter, you know what? They will matter. They'll go and knock it out of the park. You've created an environment where their natural superpowers come to fore. You're paying these people for a reason. You're paying them because they're good at what they do. Give them the environment to let them do what they do. How does that sit with you?
Oh, that sits really well with me. I like that description. And that leads me to think, there's leaders in the environment at all levels. And, a leader has to create an environment where teams want to look at themselves and reflect and build up their skills to be, the next leaders in the pipeline. Because it's not just up to the leader. The leader creates conditions, and then other people have to build on those conditions and behave accordingly. So, one of the things that I think is people expect more of the leader than they expect of themselves. I think a leader can do a great job when everybody's committed.
Yeah, well said, Melinda. There's something that I've been playing in my head for a while, and I can't think of anyone better to ask this question. There's a big drive where we all want authenticity in our leaders. We want a leader to turn up as their authentic self. We hear this a lot, and I fully believe it. We also want an environment where we can turn up as our authentic self, because quite frankly, it's exhausting to do so, right? It's far easier if you just turn up knowing with self-confidence that you are enough and you're in that team because of you. Just be you, be the best version of you, and turn up as your authentic self every day. Is there a limit to that, right? So, and where I'm going with this, or people talk about cultural fit. What if someone turns up and their authentic self isn't a good match? What then?
Well, I think there is such a thing as a cultural fit. But if I go back to what I was speaking about earlier, everyone has the capacity to modify their behavior. And if it's too difficult for you to modify your behavior to get along with everyone else, then I think the leader has the person and the leader have a conversation. They need to be having a conversation. I've seen lots of places where, we can let that go because that person gets such great results. The fact that they leave a trail of dead bodies wherever they go while they're getting those results, means we should just let that go. I think that's not true. I think there have to be some standards for behavior. Some of the things that you were describing, I guess the way I would sum it up is there's a professor at Stanford. He wrote a book called The No Asshole Rule. Maybe I shouldn't use that word.
Go. It was what was on my mind. So now we've said it out loud. That's what I'm getting at. Yeah, please go on. Yeah.
Yeah. So and what he actually does in that book is he tries to put a cost on these people. So there's a human cost, and there's a physical cost of the damage that these people make on the way. Now, they might be better suited to another kind of environment because there's lots of different kinds of people in the world. And the worst thing that we do to each other is judge each other all the time as, good or bad or this or that. There's lots of kinds of people, and they just like there's lots of kinds of flowers and plants, and they all need different conditions to thrive. And not every workplace is the same. So I think, if it's too hard for a person to manage their behavior and they feel like authenticity is suffering, maybe that's not the right place for you. But if you've got the kind of environment where you can have a straight up conversation with the leader, then everybody can take a decision. And that's quite a different thing than deciding you'll just have a coal and whack people and they have no job anymore.
Well said. I think there's a lot there, right? So first of all, I think about Einstein. I think the quote is something like, if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, you'll think it's stupid. So there's a different environment for everyone. They're always going to fit in somewhere, right? We do want people to turn up as their authentic self, but then there's the behavioural gap that you spoke about before. That if those behaviours that you reward are not a good alignment, then we've got a problem, right? So in fact, if you turn a blind eye to poor behaviour because someone's a high performer or whatever you want to call it, it actually then encourages that behaviour. And secondly, it demoralizes others because people see it and go, oh, okay, that's the kind of behaviour that's tolerated here or worse still, rewarded here. So you do need to address the behavioural gap, and it could be an awareness issue that the person is completely unaware of the impact that they're having on the people around them. So give them the benefit of the opportunity to address it if they don't have self-awareness. But if they're turning up as their authentic self and there's a behavioural gap with the behaviour expectations of the organisation, then eventually it's a different conversation. How's that summary?
Yeah, that sounds right. And that is difficult to do because people don't want to have those conversations. They're tough. They're hard. It's easier just to sweep it under the rug. And that's what I see in organizations. It's just too hard to have the conversation, or because the place is big, there's too many different views about what the behavior meant. So we can't settle on that, or, we can't prove something, or there might be a lawsuit or whatever. So we just don't deal with it. And we don't have a culture that says, leadership and behavior matters, because we're more focused on the typical things that go with performance. We have to make money here. We have to do a good job. If our engineers, the bridges can't fall down, and I'm not saying that's not important, but I think that the intellect, the experience, the capability is absolutely necessary, but not sufficient. There's this other part. And if you pay attention to that other part, it's like sometimes I use the metaphor. It's like air quality. So if you pay attention to air quality and you don't wait till the air is so dirty that you're choking, you'll manage these problems sooner, and sooner will be better. I think.
But before a lot of damage is done, and they can be challenging conversations, but these challenging conversations get increasingly difficult with time, right? So if you let it go too long, it becomes so much more difficult than if you had have addressed it very early. Particularly, like I said, it can be just an awareness issue that they've got a blind spot. They have no idea that the language that they're using, the positioning that they're doing is having a negative impact on those around them. They may have no idea. And if you give them the early notice, they can actually do something about it. If they can't do something about it, then eventually it's a different conversation. I promised to come back to stress, and in the workings that you've shared with me, I saw a wonderful diagram about stress and about a tipping point, right? So in a environment without stress, performance is actually quite low. A little bit of stress increases performance, but then there's a tipping point where it goes too far. Can you describe a little bit more about what you mean in that environment?
Well, I think that the job of the leader is to be testing the environment all the time for the balance of support versus challenge. And I'd love to say that there's a diagram out there or a set of measures that could tell you, oh, you're now about to approach the tipping point. But there isn't. Because every group of people is different. And of course, different organizations and different sectors have different pressures. And this is where the awareness, which you were mentioning earlier, is so important for the leader to be aware of where people are, to have conversations with people, one-on-one, in groups, to be always, testing the water for, what's the level of discomfort, because if nobody's saying anything about being uncomfortable or unhappy, that's a signal. So it's either poor performance or something's repressed. And if people are complaining a lot, people are leaving, there's high unexplained departures, all that, there's signals. So you have to be, watching those signals. When people start to leave, that's always a huge, red flag. But there's lots of things to look for. And I think this is where people misunderstand the role of the leader, and that earlier conversation about you're not on the tools anymore. You're taking the temperature of the place. You're looking for, you have to be a bit of a diagnostician in order to recognize how much stress is required for performance, and how much is too much. And it's movable. It doesn't stay static. It's not the same all the time. I think of all the fantastic people in the health department where I live, the New South Wales Health Department. What is it like to work in a hospital at the moment? It's like red alert all the time. How are they taking care of their people? Because humans can only take so much stress before they break, and each person has a different level. And so that's the leader's job, to be testing the level. People can. I have another colleague. You know him, Lex Dwyer. He was on the program. I got all my good colleague, the wonderful Joy Pitts, Lex Dwyer, the idea of rest and recovery. So if a team has been running hard, you can be pretty sure there's going to be some symptoms that you need to look out for. Then what do people need to do to rest so they can go again? I mean, I'll make that athlete metaphor again. They train. If they get a signal that something wrong, they back off. they don't just go 24 hours a day. I mean, there seems to be this notion that humans are like machines and you can plug them into a socket and they're just going to keep going. I think it's really just not true. And if you're going to be your best self as a leader, you also have to, understand your physical self, its impact on your emotions, and you have to understand that for the people that you are leading, so you can get an idea of, is there enough stress for us to get a good performance, or are we about to break?
That analogy about the athlete is really powerful, Melinda. And have a look at the Olympic athletes, for example, and they do measure a lot. And think about your analogy of the temperature taking the leader, taking the temperature and sensing what's going on in the environment and treating everyone as a different person, because everyone's got different stress tolerance levels, etc., and what drives them. Olympic athletes do not wake up every morning and go, right, I'm going to go out, let's say that they're a sprinter, I'm going to run 100 meters today in 9.6 seconds, otherwise I'm not training hard enough. No, they don't do that. They have seasons. They know how to judge and peak their performance so that it's going at the same time. Yet somehow in the workspace, we go, right, it's 8 o'clock on Monday morning, time to turn it on, people, and you're going to work all of these hours. Unfortunately, I was going to say 40 hours, but everyone knows that's a bit of a myth these days. You're going to work, and you're going to work at flat-out speed the entire time, and that is not optimal performance. In fact, that will degrade performance over time because stress is cumulative. So the things that I'm hearing here, Melinda, is right. So without stress, you don't improve. The Olympic athletes know that too. If they don't train, they don't improve, right? So without stress, you don't improve. And great things happen just outside your comfort zone. But if you push it too far or for too long, that's when the performance will degrade or stop altogether. That's what I'm hearing there. How does that sound with you?
Yeah. I think it's that notion of goal setting. And is the goal, have you set a goal that's so high that people just, they don't even believe they can achieve it? Or have you set something that's tough, but people can believe in it? And then as you go after that goal, you keep checking on, whether people need they need a bit of a recovery.
Yeah, I love that.
So
I love that. So setting a goal that's tough but believable, that they'll be proud of when they do achieve it, and then rest and recovery before you go again. I love that. That's really good, Melinda. All right, I want to work towards the book. So I'm so excited for this. So Melinda is writing a book about workplace myths and whether they work for us or whether they work against us, et cetera, et cetera. I want to just start with what inspired you to write the book in the first place?
I'm more of a talker than a writer. And I thought all these things that I've been observing, I need to put them in a form that I can, continue on the mission of sharing them with other people. So I drafted the book, and it's still a work in progress. I will finish it. But it made me sort of codify my thinking about the issues that we're talking about. And I wanted to put it in a form that people could relate to, because you think about the conversation we've been having, there's so many different facets to it. So I decided to think about what are the key patterns that I've observed that would help people diagnose, the stress in the environment, because we just talked about stress and performance. Well, what is it that you should be aware of or look for that could be some key indicators that there's a gap between what we're saying and what we're actually doing. I hope that makes sense.
It does. And I think it's wonderful because you are so impactful to everyone that you meet and that you coach and lead and show your gift and your wisdom. And the fact that you're going to codify it in a book that will last forever, I think is wonderful. It'll amplify that impact and get it into the hands of many more people than what you can do in in just the very engaging one-on-one conversations or one-to-group conversations that you have. Let's just pick some of them. I want to start with the hero leader. What is the hero leader?
The hero leader myth is this idea that the leader has all the answers. You know, the hero leader knows everything, will do everything, will keep us safe. Our expectations of that person are so high that the people who are in those roles, they actually come to believe that they are indeed a hero who can do no wrong, because we accord them that power because our expectations are so high. And so one of the things about leadership is that, you know, leaders are also humans. And I'm not saying that we should let them, you know, off the hook, but I don't think that setting them up as a leader and leading them down the path of believing that they never make a mistake, that's just no good. Because when people believe that they are the hero that can make no mistake, then they don't want to admit any mistakes to those who are being led. They're making up stories. Nobody wants to tell them anything because they know it's not going to be received, that, you know, flattery is the only way to go. So, you know, there's a good side to this, because the leader who is the authentic hero who looks out for people and keeps them safe is someone to be respected and followed, even if you don't agree with everything they do. That's the positive side of it. But the dark side is if we accord all the power to that person, and don't remember that they have a humanity just like we do, and they can make mistakes, you know, and we should, you know, we should tolerate some things. If we don't, you know, go for that mode, then the leader can't build that environment with us, if that makes any sense. You know, it's a dark side, light side. You know, yes. We have such high expectations. I think you can see that a lot if you look at any news headlines where, you know, we're in love with people and they do one thing and then it's, you know, they're no good anymore. It's a mythical belief, because leadership is hard. It's hard to get it right. Think of all the things that we've been talking about today. People don't always get it right.
No, we're all human. We all make mistakes.
We're all human. I think leaders who can admit that they're human, you know, they create the environment for all of us to admit that we're human. And therefore we can say, well, we made a mistake. We can do this better. You know, people can even use that famous word, I'm sorry.
Yeah, there's a few things popping into my head here that I'd like to test with you, Melinda. First of all, they can be inspirational and they can create a point of aspiration where people want to be like that, right? So there can be something that can come, the energy that comes with it, all of those things. The part where you said that they're the answer to every question, well, that's not a very good way to scale, right? So you're going to have a point where that person becomes the choke point in everything and they become the limitation. They started as the driving force that drove the business or the team forward, and then they soon became the limiting factor because they're only one person and they've only got so much capacity. And then the fall, the bigger the pedestal, the bigger the fall is going to be. I was coaching someone yesterday, and obviously, you know, confidentiality, I won't share who it was, but someone that's been a high performer their entire life. And they've had the first time in their life that they haven't met their quarterly targets in their business. And they're taking it very, very, very hard, right? So the higher you put the pedestal up, the bigger the fall is going to be. Even look at Will Smith at the Academy Awards, right? So I have a lot of respect for him. He's had an emotional outburst. I do not agree at all with what he's done, but people are going to start judging him now because he was on a pedestal for many people and now he's done something that none of us expected, right? So, there's a few things there. How's that summary sitting with you? The kind of the limiting factor, the inspirational factor, the limiting factor, and then the bigger the pedestal, the bigger the fall.
Yeah, the bigger the pedestal, the bigger the fall. The Will Smith story, I look at that and I think, wow, people are going crazy on social media about that. And he has stood up and apologized and admitted his error. And he's done so publicly. And then I think he finished with, I hope the Academy asks me back. So he's clearly expecting that there's going to be some kind of accountability. So what should that accountability be? I think that's the big question, because and I don't know the answer to it for his case, but what it points out to me is if a leader makes a mistake and admits it, in what situation should they have to take full accountability and fall on their sword? And in what situation should they take accountability, admit their mistake, and be allowed to have another go? Because I think we tend to let some people off the hook more than others. So think about the cases of CEO bullying, for example. We got the person a coach and they said they'll do better. What's the message there? Would the same accountability be accorded to someone who was, at a different level in the organization? So I think, this idea that the hero leader can make a mistake, admit a mistake, also has to go hand in hand with accountability, because the hero leader who never makes a mistake never wants to go. Sometimes they do have to go because no one is the perfect hero.
Yeah, that's a nice point, Melinda, and well shared, and it's something for us all to think about there. The next one intrigued me, the growth myth.
Ah, yes, the growth myth. There's this notion, I think it just pervades society, that bigger is better, more is better. There's no limits to anything. Everything grows forever. And there's actually no evidence for that about businesses or about a lot of things, because, most things have a life cycle. They don't grow forever. I mean, humans get to a certain height and they don't keep growing anymore. So I'm not saying that, the good side of the growth myth is that there's more opportunity. We're doing new things. We can give more jobs to people. We can have more of something. But I think there's a notion about moderation. And if you look at organizations who are constantly acquiring, merging, getting bigger, they don't necessarily perform very well, because they get so big, they're unwieldy and over complex. And working in those places is it's worse than monkey business. It's really a jungle. It's too big to be well led, if I can put it that way. Even too big to be well managed. And so I think the good side of growth is the more opportunity, but to think about growth in a planned way, to have criteria and standards about what we do and how we grow, versus just running at it for the sake of growth. And there are plenty of corporate examples of companies that just grew wildly because it's a word that we worship, and then they fell over and everyone lost out. I can remember sitting in a business school class myself when I did my MBA, and saying, I think growth has limits. I'm not sure that growth is always good. And I was, everyone looked at me like I had two heads because it's this notion of moderation and recognizing that if you grow something, it will have to adjust, and the leadership skills will have to be strengthened and thought of in different ways. You know, you can see lots of entrepreneurs talking about, wow, things seem to start to break once we've got more than 25 people. Oh, and then we get past 150 people, and now it's really difficult. And that's because of that concept that I mentioned before about people being able to retain a certain number of relationships and knowledge of others in their head. It's about 150. Well, how many organizations do you know that people are working in that are way more than 150? And nobody ever thinks about this. It's like, oh, let's just merge this because there's going to be a bigger, better return. And there's plenty of evidence that says, you know, a lot of mergers and acquisitions fail. And why do they fail? Well, culture, you know, it's those behavioral things. So why do we just worship this and think that there's no limits when clearly there are? You know, you can make more things, but you have to think about how will you do it? I mean, aren't we thinking about that now in terms of our planet?
I want to share two things with you, but one at a time when I listen to you here. My first question is whether we're measuring the wrong thing, all right? So I've been in countless board meetings, executive reviews, etc., where you present your business plan and everyone asks, where's your year-on-year growth? What's your CAGR? And it's always about the numbers, right? And how can we get bigger? How can we get bigger? How can we grow? How can we grow? How can we grow? And that becomes the fixation. The fixation becomes the CAGR. And we lose sight of the purpose and meaning of why we were doing it in the first place. So what I want to pose to you is, would growth be a healthy term if it was always how are we growing our impact? Not how are we growing our revenue, how are we growing our profit? Come back to our vision and our purpose and meaning for having this team or this organization in the first place. And are we growing our impact? How does that sit with you?
I like that. I also like when I think about impact. I think that is such a good way to think of it. Another word I would use is, how are we growing our value? How are we growing our value? If we do this, will we continue to offer value and create positive impact? We will grow without creating new problems, which will, in the end, mean that growth was really for naught, because it'll come back another way. We'll have to, because this is what happens. People just go on the numbers. They create some other problem, and then it costs money to fix that. We don't want to spend that. Well, if we spent that, now we have to grow some more so we can have some more resources to, fix that thing that we did. I mean, it's not going anywhere. I'm not saying that numbers aren't important. I mean, finance is the fuel, and it is important. It's just in relation to what? Our purpose. Are we achieving our purpose? Are we making, I want to say, positive impact? Are we creating value for customers, shareholders, stakeholders? I like to take a bigger view of it, because I think that when you do that, the growth is more sustainable.
I want to come back to your 150, all right? And I have no scientific evidence of this. I'm just going to put it out there and say that organisation of 150 people, where there's a bit more cohesion, a bit more collaboration, a bit more cooperation, is potentially having more impact and more value than a much larger organisation, and certainly more impact and value per capita, right? So once you grow to a certain scale, everyone in the audience is going to recognise this. The inefficiencies creep in.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So growth for growth's sake is not the answer.
But I don't think so. And it's this concept of how much is enough. There are people in the world who have more money than they would ever spend in 20 lifetimes. I mean, what? And there are other people who have nothing. I mean, and that disparity, that's part of what creates problems in companies, societies. Why in an organization, why should the CEO make 300 times what the frontline worker makes? The CEO could make 100 times and still be not missing anything.
Yeah.
I think.
All right. The other one, when I read The Growth Myth, it was just a personal one I want to share with you, Melinda, and get your view on. There's also an element of different leaders for different stages of a team. And I've had firsthand experience of this. I know that I'm very good at launching new businesses, at starting new teams and going from scratch to high performance. I know I'm good then at springboarding from high performance to growth. I know I'm personally terrible at the kind of business as usual, we're just kind of operating, and I would be horrendous at the downtime, right? So every business goes through cycles, every team goes through cycles. I would be horrible at the downturn. So I think the other thing to think on the growth is that you might need different leaders for different stages of that cycle. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's very true. And it comes back to knowing yourself and knowing, what you're good at. And I'm like you. I like startup things. I like figuring it out, how to get it going. I'm not so good in the steady state. But that's so important. The steady state where you really have impact and you're creating sustainable value over time. And they're different sets of skills, and no one has everything. We're all our own unique mix.
Yeah, exactly. All right, very good. I want to pick one more, and then I want to give you the opportunity to pick one of your myths as well. Which one is your favorite? But one I'd like to go is the rationality myth. Tell me more about that.
I love the rationality myth because, we do. And I like rationality too, because I like logic and evidence and order and making in solving problems and, getting the best solution. The thing is, humans aren't rational. If you think human behavior is rational, you're just not getting out enough. We aren't. We are emotional at our core. We are. Our decision making is largely based on the neurons in the part of our brain from the mammal era. And there's lots of evidence. If you read any of Daniel Kahneman's work, you know that's the part of the brain that's in charge of decision making. But we say to people at work. Or I'll put it to you this way. If someone says to you, Mick, at work, you're being too emotional, how do you take that?
Well, I'm an emotional person. That's who I am.
But it's not necessarily a compliment. It's a criticism, isn't it?
It's taken as a criticism, but
it's taken as a criticism. And I think, well, that just means you're human. Because we all are. And that's why the subject of leadership is so important, and why paying attention to all the things that we've been talking about is so important, because that's what drives it. Emotion drives us. And yet in the business world, we don't want to think about that, because we do need, logical solutions to things. I mean, you don't, I've been talking about building bridges. You don't build a bridge with emotion. You build it with steel,
physics,
and I know that.
Yeah.
But the team of people who are figuring things out, they will have emotional attachments to their ideas about how to do those things, and to say that everything is rational and to sweep an emotion under the carpet is to ignore all of our human qualities that matter so much in doing a good job. So, this whole thing of it always has to be rational That's mythical thinking. I mean, how many times have you seen people try to convince, persuade, or finally just beat somebody up with the facts because that's somehow going to convince them, and it just doesn't. I mean,
it just doesn't.
Look at what's happened in our world with trying to persuade people to have a vaccination. You know, all the medicos, they have their facts and they want to tell their facts. And no, that's being mean to medicals. I'm sorry. But, you know, people want to, you know, put all the data up, and, you know, some of that data is pretty hard to interpret. And there's a lot of emotion in it. You know, like, if I take this, will I die? No, we're emotional at our core. I go back to what I was saying about, you know, we share 99% of our DNA with, you know, chimps and bonobos. You know, there's a lot of animal instinct there. We are not machines. We do not plug into a socket 24 hours a day and go and then just compute. It's mythical thinking.
I think politics and vaccines are a classic example of that. People that are seemingly rational people that then make emotional decisions. And the fact is that we all make emotional decisions all day, every day, and we justify them rationally. But that takes a while for people to work out. A dear friend of mine, I'll have to be careful here, Melinda, because I know he listens to the show. A dear friend of mine swears that, no, he's very methodical, and if he's buying a new car, he will have spreadsheets everywhere and weighted criteria and all this kind of stuff. But from the outside, I look at him make an emotional decision that he then justifies with that spreadsheet, not the other way around.
That is a classic story, because how many times have you asked somebody how they made a decision? They've got no idea how they made it because it really was gut feel. So they're backward engineering this rational set of reasons and steps that they took, and it's got nothing to do with anything.
All right. Now, to move on a little bit, there's 10 workplace myths, and this is why I just can't wait to get hold of this book. I've seen your outline workings, and it's just amazing, Melinda, and I can't wait to get my hands on this and share it with the world. We haven't got time to go through all 10. We've gone in depth in a few already. Of the remaining, which is your favourite that you'd like to share with the audience?
Oh, gee, you know, it's hard, but I have to pick one. So I'll pick the meritocracy myth. The myth that if I work hard and I do a really good job, I will be promoted and rewarded. And in some places, that is true. But in a whole lot of places, it is not true at all. You know, it's the people who get promoted seem to be those who have a better set of networks, alliances. They use some of the other mythical behaviors like, you know, optics to create some picture of their performance that doesn't exist. I heard this story the other day, and I believe in diversity and inclusion, believe me, I do. So I don't want to indicate that. I mean, that is really important, and that's part of what this is all about. That, you know, we want to reward the people who look like me. But I heard a story about a company that's growing larger now. It's been very successful as a startup. So now it's starting to get it's way beyond 150. It's starting to get all the rules. So now when they interview, you know, the short list, they've got a rule about the short list has to be diverse. And I absolutely accept that. The issue is that in the interview process, they hadn't created a good short list because they just pasted in people who looked diverse, and those people didn't perform as well in the interview process, but they were hired anyway. So the people who had the most merit were not employed. You know, now there's a whole lot of things in that story. You know, there's the meritocracy myth that the best candidate's going to get the job. There's, you know, the optics myth of we just hired them for how it looked. But sometimes we do that. We promote or reward people for just how it looks, not what it is. You know, and then there's the whole issue of, you know, what are our procedures for or our method of determining what merit really is, because that argument is used all the time for not having a woman in a position or someone else. So there's a lot to the meritocracy myth, and that myth is a result of a lot of the ways, the emotional ways that people approach the world. And I think it's very disheartening to people to think that they're doing a really good job and they won't be rewarded, that someone else will move ahead, and they won't. Because, at the end of the day, if you're, working in a place, you want to be rewarded, you want to have a salary, but you want to be recognized, you want to develop, you want to learn. And you go in thinking that that's really the story, a lot of places tell when you join, and then no, you work hard and not going ahead.
Yeah, there's two powerful things I want to reflect there, Melinda. First of all, you brought up immediately the importance of relationships, and that does play a huge role in here. And it can be in a bad way and it can be in a good way, right? So someone that has a good network and a good set of relationships gives an indication of their emotional intelligence, and that they may be an indicator of their future performance. So it can be a good thing, can be a bad thing. So clearly things like nepotism, no. But someone that's got a good relationship, the ability to build relationships, that's a good thing. So good and bad in that. The second one, I have to say at the show, we are big advocates for diversity, equity and inclusion. Where the line is here is when you are looking to recruit someone, you are recruiting them on their merits, but it's not just what's written on the job description. It's about what are they bringing to the table, which includes their diversity of experience. It includes their diversity of thought. It includes whether they're going to bring something new to the table that another candidate might not have brought. What it doesn't mean is having arbitrary targets that says, okay, we need to have 50% of the applicants are women, or 50% are from minority groups, or whatever. So going towards arbitrary targets, no. But looking at what the person is bringing to the table. How does that sit with you?
Yeah, that's the way I like to look at it, and making sure that you looked hard enough. So every candidate that you've got a diverse list, and every candidate is a worthy. I mean, and it's a really tough one. I try to make sure that I know all kinds of people, because there's so many different kinds of people in the world, and you can't judge a book by its cover, even though we usually do that. But there's so many wonderful people in the world from all parts of the world, of all, colors, shapes, sizes, descriptions. And it would be wonderful to think that, we had this, great equality that we don't have.
The judge a book by its cover is an interesting one, and it brings up that we are all biased, but it's what we do with that bias is what's important, how we respond to that bias. If we react and let that bias influence us, that's a problem. But acknowledging that we do have some bias is a good way to look at that. It's also a good way to round out and say, judging a book by its cover, cannot wait to see your book. For everyone at home, there are 10 myths. So we've been through some of them, right? So the hero leader, the growth myth, the rationality myth, the meritocracy myth, the optics myth. But there are others. There are ones about one team, about that new rules that every time there's a problem, you bring a new rule into the business. The change is always good, which sometimes yes, sometimes no. The urgency myth and the positivity myth. So I absolutely can't wait to share this. When it does come out, Melinda, we would love to have you back on the show, and we'll also help you to get out there and promote the book and make sure that we get it into as many people's hands as we can, because I think it's going to be wonderful for everyone to receive this.
Because, I told you I'm going to finish it. I'm more than more a talker than a writer. So I'll be wanting to talk about it. So that'll be wonderful, because hopefully I can help people put some of it into practice. Sometimes you read a book and you go, oh, well, that's a good description. Now what do I do? So
Yeah.
I'm hoping I can help people with the
execution.
With the what do I do? Because
cool.
Because I like to work with people, in groups the way I did when I met you.
Very good. So common knowledge is not so common, and common knowledge is not common practice. So helping people put it into action, that's where it all hits the ground.
Yeah, maybe there might be some forum like this, or there will be, a program or a something that if people are interested, that I can invite them to by the time I
Brilliant.
speak to you again.
Okay, brilliant. All right, that takes us to our rapid round then, Melinda. So the first question, what's the one thing that you know now that you wish you knew when you were 20?
The one thing I know now, oh, wow, that I wish I knew when I was 20. I think it's that I can actually, I have some capabilities that aren't the ones that, my parents thought were my capabilities. If I just think about, my first degree is in design, because my dad was an architect. He said, and that's what I wanted to do. And he said, you can't do it because women can't be on construction sites, but women can sew. You can do fashion design.
Oh, wow. Okay. The world is changing. But yeah, okay. Very, very
I think there were some different capabilities that I had, which I finally found an expression for them, in another career stage. Because that first one, that wasn't the one for me.
Yeah, very, very good. And we are glad that you found your purpose and meaning and the gift that you share to the world. So thank you for that. What's your favorite book?
Oh, wow. Well, that's just so hard because I like books. But I think I would have to say, Sapiens. Noah Yuval Harari's book about the history of mankind. I mean, that book really put me on the road to what I wanted to write, because he talks about human beings being the only creature that has a capacity to hold a fiction in our heads and believe that fiction when it has no objective reality. But the fictions that we hold in our heads drive us to behave in ways. It's really what the myths that I talk about in the book, those are fictions people hold in their head. And when that story gets violated, it's a problem.
Oh, wow. So, okay, we're going to start a whole new podcast interview now, because that is so interesting, that the stories that we tell ourselves about us and how powerful that can impact what we then believe and then go and do. Oh, wow. Yeah, that's really powerful. What's your favorite quote, Melinda?
That's a toss-up. There's a fantastic one about change. It's a bit too long, so I'll give you the other one, because I'm not really sure who said this. I think some people attribute it to Einstein, but I'm not really sure. Some of the things you can count don't count, and some of the things you can't count really do count.
Oh, yeah. I like that. I think it might have been Einstein. I'm going to look it up and I'll put it in the show notes. But yeah, that's a wonderful one. And I've heard that one before, but not for a long time. So thank you for bringing that back to my frontal memory. So yeah, very good. Finally, how do people get in contact with you, Melinda, if they want to know more about you, about Streamwise, about your work?
Okay, well, I have a new website that's just me, my name, melindamuth.com. So you can go there, you can see things about me. I'm trying to, put, the work that I'm doing there, and you can find me on LinkedIn.
Very good. All right, and we'll put those links in the show notes as well again, Melinda. Thank you again so much. Thank you for today. This has been wonderful. I've just adored having the opportunity to explore this with you, to listen to you, and then for the opportunity to share some of my thoughts and get your reflections on those. This has just been such a wonderful opportunity, and I've learned so much from today, and I know our audience will as well. I get to once again thank you publicly for the impact you've had on my life. I can't overstate that. It's been such an impact, that program that I went on with you, what is now 13 years ago, believe it or not. But 13 years ago, we went on that, and that started a whole journey that led to where I am today. And I'll be eternally thankful to you and everyone else that was on that program, but specifically you, because you were the head facilitator and really navigated our cohort through an amazing transformative program. So thank you for today, and thank you always for what you've done for me in my life.
Thank you, Mick. It was so wonderful to have this opportunity to talk to you today. It means the world to me to hear that feedback from you. But can I just say, when you work with good raw material, you look good.
Oh, thank you. Thank you again.
You're a star, Mick.
All right. Thank you. Today's episode was brought to you by my new book, You're a Leader, Now What? The Proven Path to High Performance Leadership. The book contains many of the great lessons that we've learned together here on the Leadership Project podcast, together with lessons that I've collected over my 30-year career as a leader. The book is aimed towards first-time leaders, but really there's something in there for everyone. If you would like to show your appreciation for this show, we would greatly appreciate if you were able to go and get your copy of the book on Amazon as either an ebook or a paperback, and if you could leave us an honest review on Amazon. Thank you for listening to the Leadership Project podcast at mickspears.com. A big call out to Faris Sadek for his sound design and editing of our audio and video content, and to the whole team at TLP, Joanne Gozon, Gerald Calabo, Rika Vidanes, and my wonderful supportive wife, Say Spears, who is also our operations manager. This show would simply not be possible without you. If you've enjoyed the show, please leave us a rating and review at Apple Podcasts. You can catch the video podcast and our video of the week at the Leadership Project YouTube channel, and you can join the conversation at the Leadership Project Facebook community group. We look forward to bringing you more great content and interviews next week as we continue to learn together and lead together. In the meantime, please do take care, look out for each other, and always remember to challenge the status quo.